It is a great day to be back on the mic. Welcome to the FPL USA Press Play podcast. I am one of three handsome, brilliant, and super awesome sauce hosts. My name is John Bux. I am joined by two very, very good looking West Coast natives, starting with Brian Shin, who has paint splatter on his neck, on his scalp. Let's see if he can get a really good rank to match the heights he's been reaching this past weekend. Brian, how you doing?
Good, Bucks. I'm super stoked to be back on the airwaves. And you are alluding to my first home purchase, which I made out here in Santa Barbara, California. Super
Woo!
excited.
Congratulations.
It's move-in week, so just a bit of a demolition derby between doing a lot of renovations and trying to get into our new spot and getting out of our rental right now. But yeah, excited to have FPL drop. Lots of changes to talk about. And thankfully, we're joined with a true professional, and that is one Mr. Blackwolf. How are we doing, Dan? Great to see your smiling face once again.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm super excited for the season to be back, and I'm happy and I'm healthy, back to normal after my scare last year. So I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to get that 10K that I just missed out on last year.
That is the best news we could ever have here on the pod, to hear you rip roaring again and soaring to new heights. And we're just thankful that you are in good spirits and your health is aligned with your mind as we head into the new season.
Thank you, thank
Yeah,
you.
we got you out of the demolition derby and you're back. You're back on the mean streets of Oakland, California, fit and finer than ever. So we're really thrilled to have you back recording with us, back for season 2 of the official audio home of hashtag FPLUSA. Kudos to our co-host Dan, who really runs the show for this awesome community here stateside as we look to grow the game in advance of the World Cup 2026 in real life. But also, with a new season coming for FPL, I think we're going to set record numbers for the amount of stateside managers that we have going into the 24-25 season. So I'm really excited about that too.
Absolutely. This is our second season podding. I think we learned a lot last year. We had so many great guests join us from the wider hashtag FPL community, and then some great managers who we spotlighted from hashtag FPL USA. And you're going to hear more of those voices this season as well. We can't wait to have more and more guests continue to join this humble podcast as we look to extend our reach and grow our listenership. So thank you very much to the OGs, all of those who've been with us since episode 1. It's going to be episode 1 out of many, many to come this season for season 2 of the Press Play pod. So let's just jump into it. Let's talk about all of the crazy new frameworks of FPL this season. Dan, what were your initial thoughts when you read the first update from FPL Towers in terms of the new rule changes? Start wherever you'd like. We just want your gut reaction.
I mean, the first one I saw was the 5 free transfers. You get to roll up to 5 free transfers now instead of 2. I personally think that's an amazing change. I was so happy when I saw that. I kind of think the game's been going a little stagnant for a while in terms of transfers. And I think this change suits both the casual person who maybe looks at their team every 5 weeks, and it also suits the hardcore players like we do, who can really plan and save up their transfers and basically have a wild card every 5 weeks if you're a patient manager. So it might be a little bit of an overkill going to 5 rather than 3 or 4, but I personally love it. I think it's going to completely change the game.
I read that same rule change and I was like, wow, that is much ado about nothing, because as the Tinkertastic type of manager that I am, loving to make free transfers and take Bucks Wild -8 hits, I really think it just does away with the era of point hits for transfers. I think we're going to be hard pressed to see managers who are serious about the FPL game taking -8 or -12 hits with the changes that were made. But I do not think that there will be a single instance this coming season where I
But
have 5 free transfers. No way, no how.
I am willing to bet that you take at least one -8 this season, regardless of these changes.
Probably, probably. I will say, I think the biggest rule change from the free transfer perspective is that free transfers will survive using bonus power up chips. So, it used to be that if you used your wild card, and you had 2 free transfers in the bank, you'd get kind of crushed by the FPL community because that was just burning and wasting free transfers. Whereas I think now, when we use our wild card and how many free transfers are currently stashed away, will be kind of a strategy play for those engaged managers going forward. So I'm really interested to see the permutations and approaches that managers take to using their free transfers and the power up chips.
Absolutely agree with you. I was so excited for the free transfers to roll over when you're using your free hit or your wild card. No longer will we have to dead end our teams and make somewhat pointless transfers before hitting that wild card button. To have them on the other side is such an advantage as well. And I just think that FPL Towers absolutely nailed these 2 rule changes. I would have been happy with one or the other, but to have both of them, I usually were pretty critical of FPL Towers, and these are 2 absolutely fantastic changes. And I cannot wait to see how we use them this year. And I think the one thing when you're talking about -8s, and we'll get into this in a few minutes here, but based on the pricing, which I thought was also fantastic, like they fucking nailed it. Taking a -8 might be in the cards to make 4 moves to bring in 2 big swinging free players coming into your side, because the pricing for the premiums has gone way up season over season. So I just love everything that they did with those first 2 rule changes.
Yeah, I do think these 5 free transfers devalues the wild card a little bit. However, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think we're going to see so many different strategies across the board here, which I think is a good thing, because we were getting kind of stagnant, as I said earlier, where there was basically 2 or 3 wildcard strategies and everyone was having the same strategy. Everyone was picking the same team. I feel like this season it's going to be play your wildcard when you feel like it, to be honest, which I like a lot.
I think I totally agree with what both you just said. I think the variance levels going into this season are going to be at all-time highs. And I hope that the rule changes keep the engaged pool of managers at an all-time high for longer into the season. Because I know, we had almost 400 people in our free mini league for our podcast last year. And by the end of the season, really, it was only about 60 or 70 managers who were really still actively checking their team and making transfers and switching captaincy. And I think that the changes will spark more managers to be more serious, or even if they're not checking it every week, to at least come back to the app and know that there are still things at play for them to get their hands dirty with. So I think that is really exciting. And speaking of the long-term view of the game, that mystery chip. Dan, you already got your dip ready for that chip?
Yeah, dude, here's what happened here, in my opinion, right? FPL Towers, they got together inside a boardroom and they're like, hey, Dave, like, how's it going on that new chip? What's the design like? How's the strategy? And he's going, oh, shit. I got distracted by the Euros. It's not ready. It's not ready to go. So FPL
Yeah,
Towers
it's coming
were like,
home.
okay.
It's coming home for sure.
They were like, fuck it. Let's just call it the mystery chip. Let's figure it out later on in the season. And let's have you play it halfway through. I don't see the point in this, to be honest.
I mean, maybe they were on mushrooms and had a mystery trip, and that led to the mystery chip because they just forgot about it and have no idea. I mean, part of it is the framework of like rolling it out. Like maybe they don't have the complexity of the tech to figure it out yet. So they were like, we got to put this off for a few months before we announce it. It's obviously going to be one of those types of chips that you don't need a ton of planning for in the second half of the season. And so that part of it, it's just something, again, to excite managers on the back half of the season where we see drop off from casuals, right? So especially when you're looking at like the second chance league that started by FPL Towers for the second half of the season, it's another way to be, engaging with those casuals who might come back after the Christmas holiday.
Jokes aside, though, I'm very curious what it's going to be. Because like you said, I feel like it can't really be like a wildcard kind of chip or a free hit kind of chip, because that requires long-term planning. So maybe it's just something really fun, which I'm down for. Maybe like
what's your dream chip? What, do you have any ideas?
I would love to see something like an all-out attack chip like we used to have in the olden days, where you can just have a formation of all attackers or something like that. Or maybe a limitless chip. That's not really a free hit or a wild card. You just get to change your team for 1 week.
Limitless would be
I like
fun.
the idea of like
I
one
that.
match, like a power match. like they have in all-star games, they have like kind of the Powerball when they're doing the 3-point shootout, and that one counts for 5 and the other balls count for 1. So I know they test drove something of this nature in FPL Challenge, where like in the Manchester Derby, all the Manchester players got double points. So I think that could be a really interesting way. Maybe there's a game after the festive fixtures that they're looking to really highlight, say
Yeah.
between like the North London Derby, and then every Arsenal and Spurs player would be able to score double points, just as an idea. So I
No,
like that framework as well.
I gotta slag that. I don't think that's a good idea at all. It needs to be a wider type of chip that people can utilize. Like focusing on one game, that means that everybody's going to have the same strategy. I want it to be something that's like Dan said, like all out attack or something else. And apologies for my dog just barking at the delivery guy right now.
So Bucks' point there, maybe you get to choose the game.
Yeah, like a Derby does it. Derby does double, something like that. And you
Yeah, I
get
mean,
double points for a Derby match.
I do love it. I just think it's going to be too complicated for these archaic people at FPL Towers doing any kind of coding for that kind of thing. But I like
That's
it.
true. We just complimented them for the first 10 minutes. So now
I
we
know.
could really slag them for
Exactly.
the next 3 or 4. That being said, I think the big reaction for this season is pricing. And we set some records. We have Holland coming in at 15 million, the highest priced FPL player of all time. I think that is exceptional. And then we saw the highest price rise ever with one Cole Palmer, who went from 5.5 million all the way to 10.5 million season over season. So I just think that in general, going into each FPL season, there's been a really strong and standardized template that you could see on social media. And right now, I mean, we still have a month to go until the season kicks off, but the teams are all over the place. I'm seeing teams that are big at the back. I'm seeing 3 or 4 premiums and no Holland. I'm seeing Holland and Salah, just Holland. It's exciting. I think come game week 2, you could already be, dead in the water based on some of the decisions going your way or against you this FPL season.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think they've completely nailed the pricing this season. Like you said, all across Twitter, I'm seeing different teams all over the board. It's actually the first season in a long time that I haven't even made a draft yet because there's just so much information to come, so many preseason games, so much variance. There's not an
You're such
obvious
a
one.
prude, Dan. Golly, make a
There's not an
draft already.
there's not an obvious one sticking out to me though. That's what I love about it. Usually I'd pretty much already have my team set at this point. I have no idea who I want in my team, which I think is great. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. I'm gonna be.
I haven't made a draft either yet. It's a weird feeling. I'm just so busy with life right now. But I think, like you said, Bucks, there's so many variations of teams, and I mean, just to talk about the pricing more and more, just the amount of premiums that they have shoehorned in this year is so much better than last year. We don't have to have teams that are template where you have 9 of your 11 starters all from the top 6 teams or those traditional big clubs. They did such a good job on the pricing, and it really forces your hand to pick 1 or 2 assets or to divest that money. And that's where, again, I think the transfers that you're going to have to get Holland back into your side, to get 15 million forward back in, it's just going to take a lot more transfers. So maybe you have to continue to bank those up or save 2 and then take a -8 to get him back in. That's the situation you're going to be looking at throughout the season.
And it's not just the premiums either. They've even nailed things like Ortega and Edison at the same price. Last season, you would see that Edison is much more expensive. If he gets injured or if he leaves for any reason, then everyone's going to own Ortega. But now this season, for the top teams, they've priced the starting goalkeeper and the backup goalkeeper the same price. They've made very subtle changes like that, which I think are really good for the game.
Amen. I think we're all 3 of us just really excited for what's to come. It's going to be a much different FPL season than we've ever experienced in the past, but that's not a bad thing. I think the game was getting, as you mentioned, Dan, a little stale. We saw a decrease in managers entered into the standard FPL game last season. And I think, especially coming out of the Euros, coming out of Copa, which were both awesome to have brilliant football and soccer on throughout the off season, and going into the Olympics, I think we really want to juice the numbers. We want to have record-setting numbers of managers playing the game, and more reason to feel optimistic that, maybe you use all three of your bonus chips early in the season, knowing that you still have the second wild card and that mystery chip in your back pocket for the second half. So I think this is going to be the most insane, the most variation, and the most wild season of FPL for sure in my career.
Let me ask you, Bux, do you think it's going to be more difficult this season with the changes? Oh,
Yes, for
yeah,
sure.
I
And
was
I
going to
think
say.
there's going to be really cruel swings of fortune with the way that the pricing is, because as Brian was alluding to, you know, to go Holland or Nolland, as we coined last season, I mean, you could be 20 or 30 points in the gutter based on the way he performs and based on the way some of the other premiums perform in the opening part of the season. And
Bucks,
then you
Bucks.
basically rip your entire team apart to
Ipswich game week 2. I mean, that's
I'm
already a huge defining moment in the season. If he gets a brace or hat tricks and you spread those funds between Ollie Watkins and Isak and another forward and they blank, you are in a tough spot. And that's the
for
most
sure.
fun, these bigger swings. And I think when we look at a couple
But I
seasons
think
ago when we had
conversely,
like
Brian, conversely, right? Like you could go in game week 1, right? And you could have Palmer get a penalty and you could have Saka get a penalty and Salah. I mean, these are three premium players that you can easily fit in if you skip Holland. And again, it's just I think it's going to be a really, really challenging, really fun season because of that. And I know last season Dan and I both were in the good, and Brian, for the most part, you were in the shitter. And I could easily see that role reversed. By game week 3, we could know who's going good and who's going bad. And I think that's what's going to make it exciting, because there are going to be these massive swings based on the way that you set your team up to go kind of super premium, the superest of super premium, or to go balanced. And because of the 5 free transfers, there's virtue to both those plans.
Yeah, look, I am curious if it is going to actually be a little bit more forgiving though, because if you do fuck it up at the beginning, like you don't get Haaland and then he goes off, you can just save your transfer for 3 weeks. Then you can rearrange like a wild card. So I think it's much easier to, get back your mistakes, get your team back on track after the mistakes.
Interesting. That's a different perspective than what I'd have. You'd be really getting slagged in your mini league WhatsApp group if you wait 3 weeks and Holland just bangs in 4 goals or 5 goals in those time and you don't have them.
I mean, that's
Um,
the interesting counterpoint to people who are playing conservative and banking those free transfers. You are missing on some big hauls potentially in the margins where we saw Dan last year get a hat trick from Bowen and that was those types of players that you're not really long-term planning for, but have a 2 game, run of fixtures that seem to be in good form. The managers that use those vital free transfers and are more aggressive, that's where you could also gain on the field. So I just love the whole setup of the risk reward that we're going to see this year.
All right, I think that's a great point to end our initial reaction discussion. I just want to take a couple minutes for us to each introduce ourselves, discuss how long we've been playing the game, what our relative approach to FPL is, and maybe one nugget of information about how we are going into the season. I can share that both of my co-hosts have not made a single draft. I'm already on draft number 7. I am just totally an addict
I
to the
love
FPL
that.
game. I am like a moth to bright light once it gets after dark. And once my kids are asleep and my wife and I are watching a show on the couch, I'm not above making a couple FPL tinkers. It's in my nature. So why don't we start with you, Dan? Why don't you introduce yourself, your background, why we're gonna be bullying you for being a wolf all season? Oh, howl at the
yes.
moon and tell the listeners what's all about your FPL play style.
Right. So I'm at FPL_Blackwolf on Twitter. I started the hashtag FPLUSA group. And I would say I'm the most conservative manager out of the three of us for sure. And I get made fun of that every week from Books on
He's
that. But,
British, everyone. He wears
it's
it on
worked
his
out.
sleeve.
I've been playing seriously, I would say, for the past 5 seasons, like really seriously for the past 5 seasons. And I have all top 100Ks. So that's kind of my goal each year is to finish in the top 100K. I know everyone's looking at the top 10K, and I nearly made it last season, but I do think consistently getting top 100K, you're a good manager. So yeah, I'm just gonna try and get the same as last season. I like to think I'm the voice of reason on this pod. Bux, you're a complete madman who just goes wild every single game week. Brian, you're more in between the two, and I'm just very calm and casual. So I
With that
think
being
the
said,
chemistry works out well.
last year I was off into the deep end. I was in the sunken abyss doing some wacky moves that not even Bucks himself has thought of before. So yeah, I do agree though. It's you're the one who holds it down and holds us to some of the pragmatism that you need in the FPL game. Whereas I think Bucks and I every now and then we love to knee jerk. That's right.
Well, Bux catches those holes there that I miss out on because I'm a lot more calm. I plan a little bit more, I feel, but then he's the one that makes some wild ass move and it paid off so many times last season. It was very
Yeah.
frustrating at the beginning.
I like to think that I'm a little bit rogue in my moves, and I'm all about the eye test. I know we will have managers that subscribe to analytics community, to the models. We have managers that watch every single game, and I try and watch at least the extended highlights for every single game. So, like last season, I kept shouting out Kai Havertz and how great he was playing down the stretch. And then I kept being a chicken shit and not bringing him into my team. So, with the good comes the bad. And I like to play a little bit more on the edge between kind of calamity and reasonable risk. So I want to go for it. I want to have fun. And I used to put in a lot of crunching tackles as a central defensive mid center back in my playing days. So in my FPL team, I'm all about the hauls. So I will ditch center backs for wing backs. I want to go for the attackers. And I think this is a long way of saying that I will be on Holland to start game week 1 in no uncertain way. I'm 100% going to have Holland in my team. Maybe you call me a sheep because of that pick, but he's a player that I think can score 30 goals every season. And with the captaincy armband, he's going to be in my team, even if he's going against my side, Chelsea, who I bleed blue for. So that's me. I'm going into my 5th season, 4 top 100K finishes. My best ever finish was 13K in my rookie season. And I'm not as conservative as Blackwolf. I want to have my best ever season with the rule changes. So I'm setting the bar high, and I want to have an ambitious goal to hold myself up to.
And Bucks, I think you got to credit me for bringing you into the fold of not only FPL but this podcast.
Amen. It was all your idea, Brian. But since we started it, it's weird. It's kind of like the good jujus that you had in the FPL and winning leagues and stuff. Seems to just rub up on the other co-hosts. It's so weird.
Yeah, I slid in your DMs and we started a podcast during the pandemic times, and now we're on the ultimate edition of the Press Play podcast for FPL USA. So a little bit about me. I'm on my 9th season, which is kind of crazy now that I've looked at it. But yeah, I began playing FPL when I was living in Sydney, Australia. Had a lot of mates from all over the UK, Ireland, and different parts of Europe, and everybody was playing this game. So I had to get in on it, and shout out to my guy, a fellow blue bleeder, Mr. Kev Johnson. We had many long nights because of the time change, 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. watching football matches on the weekends, and some of the bars would stay open. Last call, 3:30 a.m. Woof. Those were my prime drinking days. But yeah, I'm definitely actually had my worst season ever last year. So I'm looking to rebound from that, but have respectable, I think, 6 top 120K ranks. So get the general gist of the game, but really hoping for a top 50K this season would be kind of the benchmark that I'm setting for myself with loftier goals ahead. But I'm, unlike Bucks, I don't truly support Chelsea. They're the team that I'm a fan of, but I'm not diehard.
Broad watch.
Yeah, I'm definitely an FPL generalist. I love my favorite players, Sonny, KDB. I have their kits. I'm a big player guy. But hopefully one day when I get to go to the bridge and I'm lucky enough as Bucks to have gone, I'll feel that magic, and I'll have more of a dedication to Chelsea, but still, that's where my affinities lie. But I always put my Premier League fantasy team first before Chelsea. No shame about that for me. I've said it once, I'll say it again all the time. FPL numero uno, baby. Got to chase those big dollars.
Sheesh. That's a cancelable take right there. I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. I know we will have many engaged managers chiming in. If you want to find any of us, you can find us on socials. We are at FPLUSA Press Play. We're also on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Google Podcasts. If they carry podcasts, we will be there. Book that. And we hope you follow along for a really fun season. We will be coming back to your airwaves with our positional preseason breakdown. And we're going to start with the goal scorers. Start with the forwards, the guys who you need to be in form to lead the line for your team each and every game week. We'll be back with that episode soon enough. For now, I'm Bux. You also had Brian and Dan. Fellas, say goodbye. Let's get out of here.
And before we end the pod, we meant to shout this out at the beginning, but we do have a free FPL Press Play Premiership mini league that you can join. And the winner, whoever takes down the title, will also receive a brand new kit from us, our friends of the pod. So to join that, you can use code T88F87. And please join us. Give us a follow on X and on Instagram, where we'll be posting throughout the season. Can't wait to ride it out with you boys into the sunset with green arrows in the horizon.